So, Shawn, as you think about what you perceive as the future within your field, what sort of advice would you have for students now, in this environment, and let's say for the next year or so, things that they really could be doing, should be doing to help position themselves for the future that you've kind of laid out?
It depends obviously on what they're pursuing. Let me start with the easiest one. If you're interested in a career of writing, there's no better time to be writing. You're stuck at home or you're stuck in an apartment, you're stuck somewhere. You're encouraged not to go out. You're encouraged to limit your interactions with friends and family. And I would just say, if you want to be a writer and you can't write during this time, maybe you should think about doing something else. So take advantage. And so for people interested in writing, whether it's writing for the screen, whether it's writing novels, whether it's writing plays, whether it's writing forms of journalism, short stories, whatever the sort of form, and Middlebury has obviously just a great, incredible legacy of writers and writing. Now is the time to indulge those instincts. I've worked with so many people in the TV business. I work with so many writers who didn't start their professional careers off as writers. They became lawyers, or they went to medical school, or they bummed around traveling for a few years. They worked for the Peace Corps, and then ultimately they became writers. So I would say for anyone listening, maybe you don't even think you want to be a writer, but maybe you've always had a little bit of an itch or a fantasy to write something, whether it's a novel or whether it's a play or whether it's a movie script of some kind. I would say now is the time to do that, to take advantage of the restrictions. And so ever since then, I've become a big believer that anytime you find restrictions being placed on yourself, that you can complain about them, but the most productive thing is figure out how to use them to do something different. So the restrictions of this pandemic can't, if your passion is to write, if you've always thought about writing, but you haven't had the time, maybe now you have the time to do it. So in that way, the pandemic, I think, can sort of help people who want to be writers. The other side, though, is harder, the production side, because, things aren't filming, or if they are filming, film sets aren't going to be as welcoming to guests and the interns as they have been in the past, because once again, we're trying to limit the number of people there are on these sets. So what I would say is that a technology exists that didn't exist in 1988 when I was at Middlebury. I took a couple film classes with Ted Perry, wonderful recently retired professor at Middlebury, where there, I think, was one or maybe two cameras on campus, and you had to reserve the cameras for like 4-hour stretches that you'd go down and you'd take the camera out. And there'd be times where you wanted to film, but somebody else had the camera during that time. And the cameras were sort of big and bulky, and they were hard to master, and it was hard to edit. And now you can literally make a little movie on your iPhone if you wanted to, and you can download the footage onto your computer, and you can get on iMovie, and you can edit it in very intuitive ways. It doesn't take years to learn how to edit the way it used to. So what I would say is that the practical sort of apprenticeship route that I think has existed for a while, hey, if I volunteer and I become a sort of unpaid intern for a month, maybe they'll then hire me to sort of, because people move up quickly in the film business because people are always moving around. I think that's going to be harder in the short term. But it's never been easier to film something. My wife, who is an actress, she literally during this pandemic directed something for the first time. She's never directed before, but she had a friend who's an actress, and she said, hey, this friend and I've written the script. It's like a quarantine story that we do on Zoom. And she had seen some videos that my wife had made on TikTok, and would you direct it? And my wife has found a way to direct for the first time remotely. And sort of one person's on Zoom, the other person's on Zoom, there's a script, they're sort of dealing with it. She's gone out on her own to film some interstitial shots. And that's something I don't think she would have done minus the pandemic. And she's found, great creative fulfillment doing that. And so I think that's a good lesson for anyone right now, is that the best thing you can do is do it. If you want to write, write. If you want to direct, direct. If you want to act. I've talked to some Middlebury acting students recently because I did a sort of presentation for a class, and a couple of them have contacted me afterwards. And I was like, just stick your iPhone camera on a tripod and do some monologues or scenes from famous movies, like play Michael Corleone in a scene, right? Play Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. Find a scene and just act. Just act. You don't have to go out and audition and have somebody cast you in something in order to act. You don't have to get somebody to hire you to be a director in order to direct something. And so I think one of the lessons I've learned during everything we've endured for the last 4 or 5 months is just do. We're very fortunate to live in a society where technology puts in your hands the ability to film these things, to edit these things. And everything's just a few type strokes away on your computer to learn about. It's very easy to go and watch interviews of famous directors talking about why they made the decisions they made. Martin Scorsese spends more time talking about film than he does actually making film. It's all available for you to watch and listen to him and learn. You can get an education outside the classroom, especially in the world of art, whether that's film, whether it's fine art, whether it's music. So if you're looking for some sort of life in the creative arts, there's so many ways to access information and learning about it now, and so many ways to just participate in the art yourself, because you do get better the more you do it.
That sounds like great advice. And I'm just thinking back to a number of comments that you've made throughout this conversation. If I were to think of the business, again, in a layperson's way, of the segments of the screenwriting component, great advice, that perhaps the balance, the distribution of functional jobs and roles as we move forward in time may shift from the production environment to the post-production environment. So that's something that students probably want to be thinking a little bit about in terms of their trajectories and what they're interested in doing. I'm just curious if you have any other things that you'd like to share with the students before we end our conversation.
Yeah, I do think, at least in Hollywood, and listen, I had all sorts of opinions about what Hollywood was like before I moved here. I was from Illinois. I wasn't from California or Los Angeles. When I came here, I really didn't know anyone. I had no contacts, and we all have this idea of what Hollywood is like. But Hollywood is a very generous place, and it's really a mentor-mentee environment. And anyone that you talk to who has succeeded in Hollywood will have a story about someone who helped them when they were young and they were foolish and they were learning about the business. I certainly have a number of people in that way. And as a result, most everyone is willing to be a mentor to someone newer and younger. So what I would say is find someone that you have a connection with, whether it's an alma mater like Middlebury, whether it's same hometown, whether it's just someone whose work you really admire, and send a note saying, I admire what you do, and I'd love 15 minutes of your time to ask you some questions. I would say don't be afraid to do that. I don't know about other businesses, but in Hollywood, things change fast. People move up and down rapidly, and people do want to help other people break into the business if A, they like them, if B, they're approached in the right respectful manner, and C, the person really exhibits that they're in it to win it, that they're dedicated, that they're going to, sacrifice to really succeed. I've met a lot of people who say they're a writer, and when I ask what they've written, they say, well, not much yet, or they're a director, but they haven't directed much yet. So there are people who sort of approach, but it's clear pretty early on that they're not really at that point in their life serious about doing it. If you're serious about doing it, reach out to people, because you'd be amazed, I think, at least in this industry, in this town, how willing successful people are, not to thrust you up and give you instant success, but give you knowledge and the opportunity for you to learn how you can succeed. Not everyone will make it in this business, and I've seen good people that I thought were talented that eventually gave up and sort of moved away. And I had an actor friend who I thought was quite good, but it didn't quite work out for him, and now he's the mayor of a small city in South Carolina. So people go on to other things. But what I would say, the advice I would give is, it doesn't hurt to send an email to someone whose work you admire that you'd love to learn from. If you send out 10 of those emails, my guess is that you'll hear back from at least 2 or 3 of them.
We've been speaking with Shawn Ryan, founder of Midkid Productions. Thank you so much for your entertainment industry career perspectives.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be able to do this, and good luck to everyone, and stay safe.